Oh, we're broadcasting. Thanks. So we're a minute early. So we're going to give people just a couple seconds to get signed on. I know Senator Menendez is working on getting signed on to his computer, and we will be respectful of people's time and get started right at noon or whatever time it is in El Paso for Ms. Collins.
It'll be 11 o'clock.
11 a.m. Looks like Senator Menendez is signing on. There he is.
There we go. Sorry about the delay.
That's okay. You were right on time.
Well,
It is 12:01 here, and so to be respectful of our time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to say good afternoon to everybody, or morning, I guess, if we're in a different time. Thank you so much for attending David's Legacy Foundation's first webinar in our new series. There are a lot of people still jumping on, but to be respectful of our 1 hour limit, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping items to begin with. Everybody should have at the bottom of your screen a chat feature. When you open the chat feature, you'll have some options of who you'd like to chat with. So if you have any questions during this webinar, please send them either directly to me. Hi, my name is Kayla Aragon. To David's Legacy Foundation, which is listed as the host, or to the option all panelists. I can't promise with our tight schedule that we'll get to all of our questions today, but I will be collecting them and gathering responses and sending them out as part of our webinar follow-up. That said, if your question is directed to a specific panel member, please specify that. For example, if it is directed to Representative Steve Allison, I would like him to have the opportunity to answer so that myself or somebody else isn't responding on his behalf. So without further delay, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Senator Jose Menendez has been serving District 26 since 2015 and was a House member for 14 years before that. Among the 200 bills he's worked to pass was, of course, David's Law. Senator Menendez has been an invaluable asset as an author of David's Law and an advocate for the work against cyberbullying. Senator Menendez, thank you for joining us.
thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Representative Allison represents House District 121, serving also on public health and public education committees. He is a respected attorney specializing in business litigation and healthcare. He was involved in the details and the passing leading up to David's Law by serving on a task force. Representative Allison, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Cezy Collins, General Counsel El Paso ISD, is a respected attorney who has served on various local and national bar foundations, as well as leading in her community for over 20 years. Ms. Collins also serves as one of David's Legacy, David Legacy Foundation's pro bono attorneys, and we appreciate her spending her afternoon with us. My name is Kayla Aragon. I am the program director here at David's Legacy Foundation. Here at the foundation, we have a myriad of initiatives and programs, but primarily We were the driving force behind Senate Bill 179, commonly known as David's Law, which is now state law here in Texas. With David's Law, we implemented changes to the criminal, civil, and education codes that redefine the definition of bullying. Previously thought of as a schoolyard incident or being pushed down at recess has now shifted to reflect the changes in society and what socialization looks like today. Cyberbullying is different because of the 24-hour access to technology, and now a single significant act that is liked or shared or commented on can fit into this definition. So Senator Menendez, we know that you worked very long and very hard to pass David's Law in 2017, and it wasn't an easy feat. We don't know that we have time to get into the intricacies of the law because it was very comprehensive. But can you talk about the school's responsibilities in creating the law and the intent behind those changes?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be with all of you. And let me tell you all that Senate Bill 179 may have my name on it, but it would not be reality without a big group of people. And amongst those, I mean, I didn't see many people working, they worked as hard, if not harder, the Molek family, the Vasquez family, my good friend and I mean, tireless co-author in the House side, Representative Ina Minjares. She and I started working on this issue, you know, way back in December of 2015. And so it's a bipartisan bill passed in the 85th legislature, and it included input from educators, parents, and students, providing schools the necessary tools. And you know, what we wanted is we wanted schools to no longer be able to say that if it happened off campus, that it wasn't their responsibility. We wanted them to understand that peer bullying in our schools is such a significant public health problem that contributes to poor health and well-being for victims, and in particular, the experience of being bullied increases a young person's risk of eating disorders, low self-esteem, deliberate self-harm, or suicide attempts. So this bill, you know, was needed because we needed to let people know that there would be repercussions and consequences, and that's the thing that I really want to thank everything that's happened at David's Law Foundation is because y'all have maintained. Yes, we have to help. And we know we have to do a mental health crisis, but we also need to let people know that this isn't just, you know, being pushed down on the playground. This isn't just about being called a name. This is much worse. And our intent is never to throw kids in jail or send them off to a different campus, but to engage the students and the parents and the educators so they can help us come up with solutions to a public health crisis that's impacting our kids statewide and nationwide. And so that's why I'm very proud to continue to work with David's Law Foundation and all of the parties that have been there since the beginning. And my good friend, Representative Allison, who's also been a champion as well for many years in our public schools.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be held responsible?
Sure. So one of the things that we wanted to do is the significant responsibilities for our schools was to the authority to investigate cyberbullying incidences occurring outside school hours. And while we see many students being threatened on social media, but not at school, making this an aspect of the bill was vital. And when, you know, one of the things, there was a young man who was suffering from leukemia, and he was being told that he needed to commit suicide. And because the person that was telling them that he was an accident that God had made and that he would die anyways, because he wasn't telling them, I am going to hurt you, the police couldn't investigate. And so we knew that we had to make sure that our schools had the authority so they could ensure that they were looking after their students and taking the necessary action to prevent and combat bullying, especially online. And so I want to make sure that all students involved, whether they're a victim, they're a bystander or an aggressor, they're protected, and that parents understand what role their students are playing. I think that that's what I really appreciate about this bill, looking for the balance of reprimanding, but also preventing and rehabilitating those who are bullying others online. And so that being said, it did give schools the ability to expel those bullies whose serious offenses were serious. And for the bystanders, the bill required the school district to develop a system to anonymously report the bullying and the threats made by their peers. This helped the students inform the necessary people about bullying. And so I really think that while it's not a perfect bill, I've never seen a perfect bill. I think we've really worked so hard to get there. And I want to thank everybody who played a role in that. And I'm telling you, this is a team effort. This bill should have everybody's name on it.
Excuse me, we appreciate that. You know, sharing the credit, and of course, you know, all the work that you have done. You know, you deserve equal credit, if not more. So when we say that the schools now have this authority, is there kind of a line there?
Well, yeah, I mean, but here's the thing I like is that if there's an incident that's reported to them, they have a certain limited amount of time that they just can't go on forever before they investigate and report to the parents of both the victim and the alleged aggressor. I think sometimes people don't, you know, I may be a perfect example. At home, I did everything I could to behave and to be a perfect kid, but at school, I wasn't always that perfect kid. And so my parents might have been surprised if I had been one of these bullies, had someone let them know. And I think it's important that our parents know this and that they're educated on this. And I think, especially now that our children all have access to social media on their phones and they can do this. So one of the things too that I think is super important about the bill is the encouragement of the districts to develop mental health plans to prevent and to mediate bullying incidences, to include suicide prevention. And I think that is really, really critical, because I think it was a comprehensive first step in combating cyberbullying, encouraging the schools to take necessary action around mental health so we can take mental health out from under the rug, out from the closet, and realize that this is a very serious issue. And I think our young people are dealing with more anxiety, more depression, more stress than ever before. And I'm so glad that this bill understood how important mental health is in the lives of our young people. And so it's in my opinion, this is really groundbreaking that we're talking about this. I had many high school students tell me the last time a counselor asked them how they were feeling and they were asking them about personally was like in middle school or 5th grade, that all of high school, the counselors only talked to them about where they were going to college, how are they preparing for their standardized test and those things. We need to do better by our students. And so, you know, we can't put it all on the students. I think that the system has let them down, and we can improve it.
Absolutely. You know, there is definitely a sharing of responsibilities, and that's part of what was so important in the passing of David's Law, is that it's not just on the schools or just on the parents or just on law enforcement. And so we appreciate that. Representative Allison, David's Law also gave parents tools through changes in the civil code, and gave law enforcement tools through revisions of the harassment statute in the penal code. In layman's terms, can you kind of explain those tools to us?
I can try. You know, and I think it's important that there's that mixture of civil and criminal. Just by way of background, shortly after David's tragic death, our school district, Alabama School District, where I served on the board for 12 years, formed a task force because it became a very, very serious and volatile issue for the community. And I was privileged to chair that task force. And we spent a lot of time dealing with law enforcement, the community, students, parents, teachers, administrators. We brought in experts, medical experts, people from the school safety center, because it is such a complex issue and such a serious one that it has a definite mix of school, community, civil and criminal ramifications. We spent about 6 months doing that and came up with some recommendations that the district adopted. And I think a number of those found their way into the workup for David's Law that I think is so valuable. And you know, it's a combination, like I said, of civil and criminal. Under the education code that deals with the school setting, it sets up a network where the schools can investigate the report, has to bring in the parents within 3 days of the bullied student, and then has to notify the alleged aggressor or bully within a reasonable length of time. That creates some fogginess, I think, but I don't know how else we might deal with it right now to provide more specificity, but I think it's worked pretty well so far. As we move into cyberbullying, that I think is becoming increasingly important, and particularly now that we're in this pandemic and the school shut down with our students and children with a lot of idle time, so to speak, and unsupervised perhaps, and time on the internet and different social media, it becomes increasingly important. But it provided the schools with authority to investigate. And what I think was key to it, it provided different reporting mechanisms, whether a hotline or different things that a student or family could report suspected bullying activity anonymously. It also provides an immunity provision that flips over into the criminal side so that there's no ramifications for reporting or being involved in a bullying situation, whether harassment, bullying, or cyberbullying. Then it flips over into the criminal side, so to speak, where law enforcement can investigate, whether it's the school district police force, if the district has its own police force, or otherwise it goes to the jurisdiction, the law enforcement jurisdiction within the campus where the activity occurred to investigate. Under cyberbullying, this last session, we passed in both houses, House Bill 3490, that both Senator Menendez voted for in the Senate and I voted for in the House. It passed to provide more teeth, so to speak, and more ramifications on the criminal side for cyberbullying. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. And looking back on it, maybe perhaps we could have done a better job on the wording. He thought it was too broad, but in his veto message or directive said that he looked forward to working next session to forcefully combat cyberbullying. So hopefully this next session we go back, we'll clean that bill up a little bit and put some more teeth into the penal code provision addressing cyberbullying specifically. Fortunately, the penalties were enhanced. It's a Class B misdemeanor for normal bullying that carries jail time up to 180 days and a fine up to $2,000. But then if it is more serious and results in a situation where there's a suggestion of committing suicide or doing serious bodily harm, it's enhanced to a Class A misdemeanor that carries a more serious jail period up to a year and a higher fine. And also, if it's a second offense, or if there's been a prior offense for it, it becomes a Class A misdemeanor. Significantly on the civil side, flipping back again, where the parents can be involved. The liability can attach to the parent or guardian. If the parent or guardian knew or should have known that there was activity going on and failed to take action to prevent the bullying. And then also the individual certainly is involved and subject to liability. Also, upon finding of a suit for bullying or cyberbullying, the parent or guardian can also be enjoined to be required to take action to make sure that the activity is addressed and appropriate counseling or rehabilitation it takes place. The civil remedies, I think, can still require maybe some more attention to get more teeth if we can. Where there's been some difficulties, there's an option to file a civil action to seek a temporary restraining order or injunctive relief with subpoena power. So you can subpoena the student, if that's who has the underlying records, the phone or whatever it might be, or the parent and the parent, if the parent's the one that controls the mechanism. And also subpoena power to try to get into whether it's whoever the server is. That's where there's been some difficulties and pushback from the operator of the phone system, the internet system, the social media system. But that availability is there. I think moving forward, this last session, Senator Menendez and I jointly passed a bill to require cyberbullying to be included in the PEIMS reporting, the Public Education Information Management System. We passed it in the House, passed it in the Senate. Somehow it fell out, whether in conference or someplace it fell out. So I think that's an important fix. We need to go back again next session because it's important. As of now, there's availability that records can be kept of the number of reported bullying activities, but it's not broken down as to bullying versus cyberbullying that I think is vitally important. It's not broken down as to more detail that could be invaluable to the school districts, to families, to the community, to try to break through the different bullying activities that are going on. So hopefully next session we refile that and get it through again so it becomes available in the PEIMS reporting system. And it's not going to require any further burden on the school districts. That information is there, but it'd be extremely helpful in combating this situation.
Absolutely. And I mean, with the dream team together, anything is possible, right?
Right.
You had mentioned if you could just take maybe one quick second to, you had mentioned that it's important that kids can't be reprimanded for reporting acts of bullying. Can you talk about why that would be important, that they wouldn't be reprimanded for that?
Well, I think it encourages the reporting. When we're dealing with a harassment or bullying situation, there could be the human nature tendency to be afraid to get involved. So I think it had to be important to recognize that there needs to be an anonymous reporting system. I know during the task force, when we checked with other districts around the country, there was some pushback or concerns that there were reports of people abusing that system. The parents of the second string quarterback on the football team would report the first string quarterback, things of that nature. But on balance, it's felt it was so vitally important to make it anonymous, to encourage the reporting to get to the system. And then the investigation will clear that out. So I think that's a key element of David's law, that have that anonymous provision, as well as the immunity provision. I think that's awfully important to encourage getting at the bottom of the bullying activity.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Miss Collins, schools are out for the summer. It is summertime here in Texas. As they start to come back in the fall, potentially virtually, what is the expectation for schools when they are out for the summer or during times when students are distance learning, which is quickly becoming a reality? And lastly, how do you think parents can help with this issue?
Well, thank you very much for being here and inviting me to speak. And I appreciate my esteemed panelists and yourself being here and their insight into this very important issue. One of the things that I think that we're dealing with when we're doing remote learning, the research has really shown us that incidents of cyberbullying among students at a school are usually related or manifest or higher when kids are in person. So when we're remote learning, we know that the incidents might not be as much, but I'm not so sure that that's not going to be the case going forward. Most often an incident will manifest itself in an in-person scenario, then it'll transcend itself to online, and then it'll get into the school culture, into the school system, and that's where we really need to focus. I think right now we're dealing with this extended period of isolation, and I don't know what effect that's going to have on our students. and how they will react to that when we get back into either remote learning or actually getting back into the classrooms. And so that's going to be something that plays out. I think what's important right now to know is we've got a lot of students that for the first time have been given devices and to be able to do the remote learning. And so that may present more issues or present more of an opportunity for cyberbullying to occur. And so I think as at the school districts, I think we're going to have to address that. I think it's key. What we need to do is to educate. I think that school districts need to continue to provide the support that's being offered through counseling and things like that, but also educating on cyberbullying and the effects of it. I think we need to beef up our prevention with regards to suicide and mental health efforts. I think it's important for school districts to look at wraparound services, how you can perhaps partner with your local health authorities with the services that are out there to help our students. But I guess to get to your question, the second part of your question is how are we going to deal with, I think it was how are we going to deal with cyberbullying during remote learning? And the reality is, and at least what I advise our people at EPISD is, it's not any different for us whether we're teaching remotely or we're in the classroom. We have the same obligations under the law. We need to investigate. We need to do the reporting as Representative Allison and also the Senator indicated. We have a obligation to notify the parents of the victim, and then within a reasonable time to also let the parents or the guardians of the alleged perpetrator know within a reasonable time about the incident, but also to finish the investigation. What is going to be difficult for the districts, and I know that we've been doing it even when we've been in summer session. You're going to do interviews, but your interviews aren't going to be in person. And you know, in-person interviews are probably the best way to actually get the facts. But we're going to have to use technology to help us in doing the investigations, whether it be Zoom meetings or Zoom calls or telephone calls and telephone interviews. Whatever the technology is, we're going to have to use it to be able to comply with our obligations under the law.
Absolutely. And I wonder if it's going to be harder for teachers to kind of pick up on these cues as, you know, they're no longer able to read necessarily the body language or, you know, how people are within a face-to-face class.
I think you're exactly right there. I think what is going to be necessary is we're going to have to be hyper vigilant. We're going to have to be very aware of what the signs are. We're going to have to make sure that teachers are aware of the signs. We need to look at what mental health experts are telling us when students are back in session, that we may see an increase in activity or bad behavior just because, or just frankly acting out because they've been so isolated and we really don't know what effect we're going to have, this pandemic is going to have on our students. But I think the best thing that we could do during this time is educate our parents about social media, about proper uses of devices, what is acceptable use, what is not acceptable use, especially for the younger students that maybe have not been have access to the devices or social media before, and so it may be all new to them. I think parents need to really take the time to talk to their kids about what activity that they are doing online and having healthy conversations with their children. And also, you know, frankly, one of the things that David's Legacy Foundation does when we're making presentations to students, we're trying to teach them the difference of, you know, what's rude, what's mean, and then what rises to the level of bullying. Well, those are the same conversations that we need to be having now with our students. And we also need to let students know the ramifications of what can happen if you happen to participate in an activity like that. There have been instances where students have lost scholarships. They have been excluded from the privilege of playing in extracurricular activities or participating in extracurricular activities. People have, you know, lost their ability to do certain jobs. So there are ramifications, and those are the conversations that I think are very important to have now, so that when we do get back into the classroom, that we're not seeing an uptick in or a rise in activity.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the floor over, if that's okay, back to Representative Allison here. You know, in the last few months, if there has been this uptick in online, you know, hate, for lack of better phrasing, and public shaming of individuals that Ms. Collins has just kind of alluded to, you were instrumental in passing that legislation last year that requires schools to teach character education. And that's really important. And that's something that's already started to come through on the chat is referencing the character education. So can you please tell us how character education is tying into the online world and why that's relevant to the law and what we do here?
Yes, thank you. You know, and the character education piece really developed through the task force that I mentioned. And came out as a recommendation to Alamo Heights to instill character education as part of the curriculum, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it was adopted, and it's been in place, and it's working, which is just tremendous. And that was the genesis for the bill I filed with a colleague from Houston, Dwayne Bohack, this last session, and it was passed and the governor signed. To require character education be implemented in the curriculum statewide in all public schools and open enrollment charter schools, K through 12. And it's being done, and it's working tremendously well. I've been overwhelmed by how quickly it's been in place. I was fortunate several months ago to present a certificate. There's an organization out of Washington, D.C. called character.org. That has really become a prominent character component across the nation. And they have an exhaustive program, and they gauge the different programs that are taking place, and they recognize certain schools and districts around the country. And we had two in our district recognized as National Schools of Character for this past school year. One of them, like I said, I presented the certificate. They have taken it to an art form. In their, after the presentation, they took around a tour, and each of their hallways has a street sign, and each street sign is a character trait. And in their gym, they have a huge mosaic that's devoted to character education. There are character education, positive character trait signs and signage all over the campus and the hallways and the classrooms. And they have their teachers really zoned in on developing character informally. It's not like this is third period, I go to character education. It's in every single class and just embedded in the curriculum. In the younger grades, the kids don't even know what's happening, but it is. And in the bill, there were specific traits that we wanted to be included. Honesty, integrity, respect, courtesy, self-control, freedom from prejudice that is so important, caring, empathy, respect for authority, and concern for the common good in the community. All of those, you know, whether we're talking about bullying, cyberbullying, whether we're talking about racial issues we're having, discrimination, school violence, community violence, all of it. It's back to the conduct. You know, and that's really at the heart of David's Law. We're trying to change conduct and improve conduct to the point of ideally someday there won't be any need to enforce David's Law because we will have molded conduct. And I think that's what's so vitally important within character education. And I've been just so pleased how well it's been accepted and implemented. And I think we're just going to see it grow more and more. And you know what was really heartwarming when I was at this presentation, I stood back and kind of watched the interaction with kids and their parents. And not only has it gone down to the kids, it's coming back up. So that the kids are developing character education back in their parents, which is so vitally important. I'm pretty enthused about it. And you know, it also moves into mental health and suicide prevention that Senator Menendez alluded to, that I think is so important. And we did quite a bit of work this last session on that. And hopefully we won't have a setback because of the pandemic shutdown. I don't think we will, but we put a lot of training provisions that our teachers receive more training on identifying emotional problems or worse at the earliest possible opportunity. We enacted a mental health consortium bill that is an expensive bill, but I think so important to identify and get help at the earliest opportunity. Because, you know, to get someone to a child psychiatrist takes months under ordinary circumstances. This expedites that process, and it expedites it through the use of telemedicine. That we can get a child or family to a psychiatrist or a psychologist at the earliest opportunity for sessions through telemedicine, and then necessary follow-up as required. One thing I'm encouraged by that the governor did during this pandemic is that he granted some waivers to allow more telemedicine. And I'm hopeful that we can keep those waivers as permanent when we go back this next session, because it just enhances and increases the availability of that valuable help. We also passed within Senate Bill 11, the school safety bill, there's a mental health resource provision. Provides mental health resource, both materials and professional help. Initially through the service centers for school use, but also intended to go to the community use, that I think is so vitally important, because as we're finding, you know, for teenagers and young adults, the second highest cause of death is suicides. So we need to put more attention there. And I think through character education development, treating each other, one another correctly, avoiding the stressful situations and all, I think we're going to get there. You know, and I'd miss what David's Legacy Foundation has done. It's just been phenomenal. And what Maureen and Matt Molak have done, they have saved lives. There's a amount of gratitude, and we're going to keep doing that.
Yes, sir. You shared the story of the school that kind of did the signs and the murals, and you know, that's something that anytime a kid or an adult walks into that school, they'll see. But as we temporarily shift to virtual learning, is there a difference in in-person character versus online character?
Well, no, there shouldn't be. But I think it's much easier to do person to person. But the messages and the lesson plans, I think, can still be done virtually. I think it's very, very important. Ideally, I think the better situation is face-to-face, because a lot of it is the students, the kids' interactions with one another. And that can't be done virtually very well.
Right, and I know Ms. Collins had, you know, kind of mentioned the same thing as we gear up to go back potentially virtually for at least a little bit here in the fall. That being said, things continue to change, right? Everything is fluid. We're going with the flow here with COVID. And we have mentioned a couple times that there are some potential changes or things that may be done to the law. So Senator Menendez, if I can loop you back in here, we know, of course, that you're committed to David's Law and making it the best that it can be. And last session, you, along with Representative Allison, worked together to pass some additional legislation to strengthen that law. Can you tell us a little bit about those changes and any future plans that may be coming kind of down the pipeline?
Sure. I was very proud to work, my team and myself, with my good friend, Representative Allison, to follow up on the progress that's been made with David's Law. You know, and many times after a law is passed and you implement it, you start to see things that need to be improved, strengthened, or what can be built upon. And so I think that's what we did last session. And so one of the major bills, I think Representative Allison did a great job talking about Senate Bill 885, talking about digital citizenship. And that bill was amended onto a comprehensive mental health bill, Senate Bill 11, as we heard earlier. And, you know, we've heard time and time again, as technology is constantly changing, we know that students need to be updated on what methods they need to be responsible and the safe use for these tools. You know, we heard that from Ms. Collins, and it's not just the students, the parents, the teachers, everybody needs to talk to about how you use social media. The other thing is, I mean, you know, simple things that we need students to understand, that just because the classroom is now virtual, maybe their kitchen table, and maybe somewhere in their room, they need to be just as engaged. They need to if they have a uniform at school, they need to be wearing the uniform. They need to be mentally checked in into what they're doing. And curriculum centered around teaching students the understanding of safety, legal, cultural, and societal issues relating to the use of technology and information. And you know, one of the things I hate the most is high stakes testing. And because it consumes a majority of the curriculum time taught by our teachers, I think sometimes our students miss out on that vital information that could teach them on how to be responsible on social media. The great news is that I believe that we're going to have a reprieve from the infamous STAR test. And I think that it's important that we use that to talk more about what's happening in society. I mean, we should embrace the fact that COVID-19 has changed so much that many of us are worried about our family's health, about our community's health, about who's getting sick, who's getting hurt. And I think that can be a part at teaching these children about being a part of a larger community. I think it's one way to connect with the students, even though we're separated by distance. We need to find ways. Now, an additional amendment to SB 11 that I thought was very good improvement was expanding the anonymous reporting, in which we include school personnel, because many times our teachers, our coaches, school administrators, nurses, others spend so much time with our students. It's important to allow them to anonymously report any incidents that they are seeing. Because we need to be able to ensure that every student is safe and that we can report whatever we need to report without fear of any repercussions. Additionally, I love the language that we added with the focus on suicide prevention, and a word that I had not heard before, which is postvention in our schools, by training our teachers to more often recognize the signs of suicide and to add mental health to the curriculum. And friends, one of the things that's so hurtful is once you've already had a tragedy of suicide in a school, many times the students and the parents and the teachers don't know what to do. The teachers don't know what to say. It's like there's a disconnect. And so the postvention training is critical. And we've had schools, unfortunately, that have had more than one suicide in a short amount of time. And I think that's really important, because especially because all of our school personnel are in front of our students for a very significant portion of the day. I think it's important that they have the training on suicide prevention and postvention as a routine part of their education. I think it's critical, and I think it would help this type of regular training to effectively respond to any of our students who might be at risk of mental illness or suicide. And so I think by learning this type of material in our health classes, we could help provide students proper tools to cope with depression and anxiety while educating them on the resources they receive. Now, we know that we're in this distance learning. I believe that we're going to see, at a minimum, we're in the 4 weeks. There'll be, if the school boards vote for an extended 4 weeks, there'll be another 4 weeks, because I just can't see that there's going to be a vaccine readily available. So unless we have a way to make sure that we have students who are COVID-free coming into the classroom and teachers who are COVID-free coming into the classroom, I don't understand how it makes sense to put people in large groups back into a classroom without having these safeguards. I mean, believe me, I, like everybody else, want us to get back to our normal way of life. But unfortunately, due to COVID, we don't have that. So I think we have to figure out ways to improve how we understand, how we interact with each other. And the thing is that with this COVID-19, it makes it that much harder for our teachers to see the students and to see what did they eat lunch? Are they by themselves? Are they not with each other? Or what are they doing? And so I encourage maybe having more Zoom meetings, outside of the ordinary everyday thing, and maybe interacting with the parents and maybe helping the parents understand what's going on, because every addition that we can make to our laws to make it a successful focus on mental health and suicide prevention are something that I hope we can work on, especially come January. In recent years, we've seen mental health be a big issue in this state, but I don't believe that change alone is enough. And I think we need to see multiple pieces of legislation centered around this issue, especially in light of this COVID-19 pandemic. And so I completely agree with Steve in the fact that we got to get back the PEMS system, the reporting, and so that we understand where we are on bullying and cyberbullying incidences, and that they be reported and that they be included in the annual report. I think people, they respond to what things that are measured. And so I think measuring that allows us to get details, to adopt preventive measures along with tactics to address bullying and cyberbullying. So if we see an epidemic as big as this is with our youth on mental health and suicide, I think it's imperative that we give our schools and our school districts every bit of information available so that they can make the best decisions and take the necessary actions to protect our students. And another thing I think legislators need to turn their attention to when we do eventually go back to school is how COVID-19 has impacted our students' health and overall well-being. And like everyone else, children have been impacted significantly, especially our youngest children who've experienced maybe a school closure in the spring and are dealing with that same issue now. They have not reached the stage of development where their coping skills are ready to help them navigate through these transitions. And so I think many may be experiencing less exercise, a struggle to maybe meet their nutritional needs, living with stress and fear of being infected, with their parents being infected. Maybe their parents are in the jobs that we call essential, and they have to leave every day. And so in addition, they may be depressed and confused about not being able to see their friends or their teachers. And so we have to make sure that we equip the schools and our teachers with the funding and the resources they need to help our students with mental health, especially when school convenes. Look, this state spends over $80 million on the STAR testing. I think we could reprogram that money to help our schools deal with the issues and the impacts of COVID-19. I think it's important, critically important, that you all have the resources that are available online. And especially since we can see that we're at least for 4 weeks of virtual, and I'm going to suggest to you that we have a minimum of 8 weeks of virtual. I hope and pray that there would be a widespread vaccine or that this thing would go away and that we'd be back to normal, but I just don't see that happening.
Excuse me. You and Representative Allison both brought up this PEMS reporting and how that was kind of in the plans and in the works with, passing some changes and some improvements. What we've been hearing at the office is that there may be pushback on that because schools are afraid that if reporting goes up, they're going to be kind of reprimanded for it. Whereas, in our minds, we'll be able to identify schools that are doing well and kind of figure out what is working and how we can share that. Is that kind of your thoughts on it as well, that it's not meant to be used as a reprimanding process?
Absolutely. I'm not looking for, look, I'm not a fan of the A through F school rating system as it is. I'm not a fan of the STAR testing. I would love to see what was described earlier, where a lot of the teaching happens as a part of a holistic, comprehensive methodology. So whether character education, I think schools and teachers have more on their plate than ever before. And so we get too far in the weeds in terms of wanting to know exactly what this standardized test teaches or didn't teach. I think we need to get back to basics and make the school a healthy environment, mentally, emotionally, nutritionally, and a place where people feel safe and they feel good about being. And so I think that's important, because that's the only way the children want to go to school. And if you're being bullied, you're not going to want to be there. And so many times kids won't tell their parents anything about whether they're being bullied or not, which is why it's critical that the schools measure it, that they take it seriously. Because if the kid doesn't feel safe and feels they're going to be bullied, how are they going to be focusing on a test or on learning if they're not in an environment that's conducive to them being just themselves? And I think that's one of the things that I want more than anything. I want people to understand. So this social emotional learning that I'm seeing in the chat, critically important. Character education, critically important. I think more than ever, and I feel badly that it feels as if we're having to put more on the school system, but it's the school environment where the children are spending the most amount of time. And I think it's very important that we create the safest and healthiest environment we can for our children if we care about what they end up being. I want them to learn. I want them to be able to go to college if that's what they want and get a job. But more than anything, I want them to be good people. I think the most important thing is that they have integrity, that they understand kindness, that they understand how to deal and take care of depression and anxiety, and not rely on thinking that suicide's the easy way out. That's the thing. That this is not an easy problem. And it's sad that we feel like we've got to put so much on the schools, but unfortunately, because of the situation that we're in, we've got to figure out how to empower parents and educators. And this has got to be a community solution. There's no easy answer. And so we're doing the best we can. I know I can't legislate morality. I can't legislate common sense, but I'm going to do the best that I can to help create a better, a safer environment. And that's why I love the fact that David's Legacy Foundation is bringing us together to talk about things that we normally wouldn't talk about. And so this is important. And you're making it important. And that's important. If not, we're not going to have this conversation. We might have it around the dinner table, but it won't happen in an environment where we're all talking together.
Right, and the community aspect is so important, and Representative Allison alluded to the same thing. And so now David's Law has been in effect for almost 3 years, and we're still finding that some schools and law enforcement don't necessarily know anything about this law or their responsibilities to enforce. So in our office, for example, we've been hearing from parents here recently that they are frankly in shock of what they're seeing on their children's devices. So Ms. Collins, if I could pass it back to you, can you talk about some tools that are available right now to help our listeners and those who are tuning in right now and who will watch this later to handle a situation of cyberbullying, or anybody who may be interested in learning more and sharing this message with their school community, which, if this is such a community issue, is so important?
Sure, absolutely. The David's Legacy Foundation has a pro bono attorney aspect to it, where they'll match victims, minors of cyberbullying and bullying with those pro bono attorneys. And the mission of the Don't Bully Me project is to use these legal remedies just to make it stop, frankly. And that can begin with something very simple as the attorney sending what we would call a cease and desist letter to the parents, letting them know what the activity is, that it is wrong, and that it needs to stop. If that doesn't stop, they can go to the next level, which would be probably, which could be seeking injunctive relief. From what I understand, since the Don't Bully Me project and the pro bono attorney aspect of it has been in place, that when there have been incidents where they needed to send a cease and desist letter, that the letter alone from the attorney is enough to make the activity stop. And that's wonderful. They don't want to go to the next level if they don't have to. It's about stopping it at the lowest possible level. And and I understand that at this point there hasn't been, at least the last time I heard Jimmy Carter, who is one of the pro bono attorneys, that he has not had to file an injunction yet, that the cease and desist letters are strong enough to make the activity stop, and that's what the goal is. There are the other resources that are available is the David Legacy Foundation website, davidslegacy.org. You can go on there. There are resources for teachers. Well, starting off with students. Students can go on there. Students can get information on there. Students can actually contact somebody at DFL if needed. Educators can go on there, and there's a variety of resources there. There is a one-pager on what David's Law is. There is a bullying checklist in English and Spanish that educators and school districts can use. There are common sense materials about social media, things that parents need to know about social apps and what they are. There's so many of these social apps out there right now. It's hard to even keep up with them. It changes on a daily basis. There are resource flyers. And also you can actually request presentations from the foundation. And they will do that. I've given several of them to students in the elementary school ages, anywhere from the little tiny ones to 4th and 5th graders. We teach them about what it means to be rude, mean, and bullying, and how to be an upstander instead of being a bystander. Like you see at the airport, if you see something, say something. And so it's creating that culture and educating the students from the very young ages so that we're building good character in our students within our school system. Because of COVID, those live presentations are now, you can request them and they can be done virtually. And you can do that, they'll do them through Zoom. The presenters are, like somebody like myself who's an attorney, but we're all about volunteers. There's also staff, and they are age-appropriate presentations that are research-based. They have been vetted by mental health authorities and counseling organizations, and so you can request those presentations.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate, of course, all of your knowledge. All of us here at David's Legacy Foundation want to thank all of our attendees for spending part of your day with us and attending today's webinar. We hope the information was insightful and useful, especially in today's climate and today's ever-changing world. A special thank you to our panel members, Senator Jose Menendez, Representative Steve Allison, Cezy Collins from El Paso. As I mentioned before, all of your questions that have come through chat, several of them were answered kind of as we went, but they've all been captured, and we are going to continue to review them and make sure that if they were directed to a specific person, that we have that specific person answer that question. They'll be collected kind of on a Word document, and that'll be sent out as part of our webinar follow-up. Anybody who registered for this event will receive a copy of that. You will also get information about our upcoming events, which you can always opt out of, but of course we want to stay connected on social media. As Ms. Collins had just mentioned, that's how we stay connected primarily with our following and our students. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. So please stay connected. Just as an FYI, this is now a monthly series. This is our first one in the monthly series. Our August webinar is going to look a little bit different. It is going to be kind of on the tail end of a virtual community screening of the documentary Angst, which is going to talk about social media. It's going to talk about mental health. Then we're going to have a panel of experts who, are the experts in that topic as well. So as a final note, as Ms. Collins has just talked about, we appreciate all of you and your patience, really. COVID is changing daily. All of us here at David's Legacy Foundation are working to meet those needs the best we can, as often as we can, and as soon as we can. So our presentations are now virtual. which is great because you no longer have to be in the San Antonio or the El Paso area to be able to request one of those. But they are going to be offered hopefully again once we're back in school, potentially after Labor Day. But we appreciate you being patient in the work that we're doing, and just know that we are doing the best we can to meet the needs as they change. And so we appreciate all of you again. Again, thank you to our panel members, and thank you to all of you who have tuned in. We appreciate all of your time.
Thank you, Kayla. As we go virtual, think about this. Y'all could fill a space in creating a safe environment for learning communities.
We hope so.
Okay, thanks. Good to be with all of you. Have a safe day. Be safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.